Welcome to Module 2 of these Baseball 5 webinars. In this module, we'll go through the official WBSC Baseball 5 Rulebook. We'll analyze the rules of the game and carefully explain any situation that could create doubts. Note that this is the latest version of the rules document. It is possible, and even normal, for the rules of the game to adapt and evolve over time. This is common to all sports. Keeping with the accessible philosophy of Baseball 5, the WBSC is trying to keep the rulebook as simple as possible. Nevertheless, as the discipline evolves, the rulebook will also evolve. So we encourage you to stay up to date by regularly checking the WBSC Baseball 5 websites. To sum it up, Baseball 5 is the urban version of the classic games of baseball and softball. It is a fast, young, and dynamic discipline that follows the same founding principles of its parent disciplines. Baseball 5 can be played everywhere and requires only a rubber ball. And just to outline our presentation here, we'll begin by looking at the field itself. Then we'll move on to the game preliminaries. After that, we dive into the rules of the game. And finally, we'll have a look at what happens at the end of the game and how a game can end. But first, let's have a look at the Baseball 5 field. As you can see, it's a fairly compact field of play. And it's because of these tight dimensions that we begin to understand the speed and pace that Baseball 5 has. The infield has a square shape with a base in every corner. The distance between bases is 13 meters, or 14.5 feet. Starting from the batter's box behind home plate, the bases are numbered counterclockwise like in baseball and softball: first, second, and third base. The fair territory has a square shape of 18 meters, or 59 feet, per side. The no-hit zone is not part of fair territory. It is this marked area in front of home plate. To create the no-hit zone, simply draw a straight line starting from 4.5 meters from home plate on the first base foul line to its equivalent point on the third base foul line. In this picture, you see two lines drawn. The line nearer to home plate was drawn at 3 meters. This smaller no-hit zone is recommended for all games in the U15 category and below. So when you have younger players, your no-hit zone is a little bit closer to home plate. As you can see in this picture, the batter's box has a square shape of 3 meters, or 10 feet per side. It sits outside of fair territory and is built on the extension of the two foul lines crossing each other at the home plate corner. Home plate, as you can see in black in this slide, has the same shape as it does in baseball and softball. Now let's have a look at the bases. The ideal shape and size of all bases is a square of 50 centimeters per side. Unlike baseball and softball, the bases are simply marked on the ground. They can be taped or painted. They are not physical cushions like in baseball and softball. First base, as we see here, is double wide, like in softball, to avoid collisions. The defensive play is made on the base in fair territory, while the batter-runner has to touch the base in foul territory. The batter, once they reach first base safely, has to remain within the area called the safe area, which is extended in foul territory for 1.5 meters. And the safe area here is indicated in black as an extension of the yellow foul side of first base. If the runner fails to remain in the safe area, then a first baseman can tag the runner and actually record an out, even though they might have initially been ruled safe. A word about fences here. The ideal height for outfield fences is 1 meter or 100 centimeters, as it is indicated in this slide. This is the standard height for sanctioned international competitions. However, every organization may decide on other ways of limiting the field of play. You can have a higher or lower fence. You can have a wall instead of a fence where the ball is always in play. Or you can even have a line marked on the ground. And if the ball goes over the line, you simply apply ground rules. The same thing happens in baseball and softball to an extent. Playing grounds or stadiums are different everywhere. And sometimes special rules are applied because of the nature of the playing venue. Moving on from the field, we'll now look at the game preliminaries, beginning with the Baseball 5 ball. All sanctioned Baseball 5 competitions are played with approved WBSC Baseball 5 balls. The WBSC actually has a certification program in place with a few ball producers already certified on different continents. Now to look at the lineup card. Before a game, each team must present a fully filled out lineup card to the table official. An additional lineup card must be presented to the opposing team before the beginning of the game. The lineup card lists the 5 active players hitting from 1 to 5. The batting order shall be followed throughout the game unless a player is substituted. In that case, the substitute shall take the place of the replaced player in the batting order. Now some of the basics. A Baseball 5 game is composed of 5 innings. Just like in baseball and softball, an inning is completed when both teams have had a turn at bat. In major competitions, Baseball 5 matches are made up of a series of best-of-3 games. In that case, in those best-of-3 series, the team that wins 2 games is the winner of the match. The number of active players per team during a game is 5 at all times. If a team cannot meet the required number of players on the field, for injuries or ejection or really whatever reason, the team must forfeit and the game or match is over. The maximum number of players on the roster is 8, 5 in play, plus 3 reserves. In any WBSC official competition, it will be a mixed gender roster of 4 and 4, male and female players. All athletes must be registered in the lineup card with a number from 0 to 99, and that number must appear on the jersey and be clearly visible at all times. As we just mentioned a moment ago, official WBSC Baseball 5 competitions will always be mixed gender. Teams must have a minimum of 2 athletes per gender on the field at all times. In terms of attire, general urban sports attire is recommended for playing Baseball 5. But as with everything else in WBSC official competitions, there will be specific uniform guidelines. In fact, there's already a dedicated tournament regulations document for uniform specifications that provides further clarity. If some players require finger taping, that must be announced to and approved by the game officials prior to the start of the game. Finger taping will only be allowed if it does not improve performance. And beyond that, only knee pads and elbow sleeves are permitted as protective equipment. Baseball 5 is a game played with very little equipment. And with that in mind, we'll move on from the game preliminaries, and we will now look at the rules of the game. Like in baseball and softball, the home team starts the game on defense, and the visiting team starts on offense. The defensive team needs to make 3 outs in order to switch from defense to offense, etc., etc. That goes on throughout the game. And of course, the goal of the offensive team is to score runs. But now we'll look at the defense. We'll start with a note that all 5 defensive players must be in fair territory when the ball is hit. So nobody can be in foul ground, foul territory, before a batter hits the ball. A typical defensive formation is shown in this image on your screen. Going around the infield from first to third base, you have a first baseman, second baseman, a midfielder, a shortstop, and a third baseman. Again, this is just a standard formation. The positioning of the defensive players can change after every play. They can move around in fair territory wherever they want, according to their strategy. And it will be interesting to see all the different strategies that different teams come up with. As we mentioned, the visitor team starts the game on offense, at bat. Their hitters will appear one by one, following the order submitted before the game. Hitting is one of the most important skills in Baseball 5, and the game effectively starts with the first hit. Before we go any further, I think it's important to have a look at a proper hit. That's really good technique. The batter is low to the ground, he hops, smacks, and follows through. In further modules, we'll really take a much closer look at hitting. But we'll talk about it here. The batter can begin their motion when they are entirely in the batter's box. The batter actually has to remain within the lines of the batter's box until the hit ball leaves the hand. Something else to note is that every offensive player must raise the hand that he or she intends to use to hit the ball as they enter the batter's box. Once they've announced which hand they'll be hitting with, the ball then has to be hit with either a palm or a fist. The hit ball must have enough momentum to reach the outfield fence. Basically, you can't tap it, which would be the equivalent of a bunt in baseball or softball. You have to try and hit it hard. Should any defender touch a hit ball in fair territory any time before it reaches the outfield fence, the ball is automatically considered valid and the play is live. This applies to both voluntary and involuntary touches by the defensive team. Up to the U15 category, the hit ball must have enough momentum to reach the outfield, passing the line that connects first, second, and third base. So our U15 players, everybody 15 and below, they just need to hit it hard enough to get it out of the infield. But everybody above the U15 category has to hit the ball hard enough that it reaches the fence, or at least has the ability to reach the fence if the defense doesn't touch it. Looking at illegal hitting here, we'll note that for a hit to be valid, the ball does not only have to have enough power to reach the fence, but its first bounce must also be in fair territory, beyond the line marked in front of home plate, that no-hit zone that we introduced earlier. For the U15 and younger categories, the line is marked at 3 feet. That's the closer line in the no-hit zone. 3 meters, about 10 feet. For older players, it's marked at 4.5 meters. Another important difference between U15 and everybody else, U15 players get a second chance if their first hit is ruled an illegal hit. If the first bounce is in foul territory or if it doesn't go beyond the no-hit zone, they essentially get a strike and a second try. But for the older players, any illegal hit results in an immediate out. There are no strikes in Baseball 5 for grown-ups. In this video, we'll see a very clear example of an illegal hit. The ball clearly bounces in front of that white line, the no-hit zone. And you can see there's only one white line here. There are no U15 players. So that's the 4.5 meter no-hit zone. Very clearly, that young man hit it right into it. Moving on, we'll have a quick note here about scoring runs. Just like in baseball and softball, a run is scored when a player reaches home plate having passed all the bases during an offensive inning of his or her team. The player must touch first base, second base, third base, and home plate in that order after a hit or a teammate's hit. And of course, they must complete their trip around the bases without having been ruled out by defensive play or due to illegal behavior. Switching gears, we'll go to the bottom half of the screen and start talking about outs. We already know that the defensive team needs to eliminate 3 opponents or make 3 outs in an inning in order to switch sides and become the offensive team. But how can the defense make outs? Well, we're going to have a look at a number of examples. Perhaps the most common way that the defense can make an out is with a force out. That's by touching the base that a runner is forced to run to while in possession of the ball. And you're going to see a very routine play here that results in an out. The batter hits the ball, second baseman fields, throws to first. That's a force out at first base. We'll watch it one more time. The ball is caught by the first baseman before the base runner gets to first base. That's a force out. A defensive player can also catch a hit ball before it touches the ground. This is called a fly out. And we'll see one in the example here. That was actually the first baseman who made that catch. A nice catch too. We'll watch it one more time. Boom, fly out. A defensive player can also make an out by tagging a runner when he or she is not on a base. And we define tagging as touching the runner with the ball in hand. You'll see it very clearly on this example. We're going to have an out at home plate. There's the tag. And it's a really good defensive play by the blue team. It's a good hit. One bounce, then off the wall. But there's the throw and the tag out at home plate. We'll watch it 2 more times. The defender makes the tag and shows the ball to the official just so the official is sure that they still held on to it. Great play right there by that blue team. Another way to make an out is with a tag at first base. This happens if a batter reaches first base safely but fails to remain in the safe area and is then tagged by a defender well outside of the safe area. Really smart play by the first baseman here. After making the catch, she identifies that the base runner has left the safe area and then applies the tag, even diving to make that tag and get the out. The runner needed to stop in that black safe area. Great job again by the defense. There are a number of other ways outs can be recorded. Offensive players can also eliminate themselves due to illegal behavior. This first example shows a batter ruled out because he stepped on one of the batter's box lines while hitting the ball. It isn't much, just the toe of the right foot. But it's enough to be ruled an out. And a great job by our field official. The official's on the right side of the screen. Watch how closely he's looking at the feet of the batter. That's a job very well done by that field official. And the batter's out. You'll see it one more time. There's the step on the lines. In this next example, the base runner is going to be ruled out after being hit by the batted ball. The runner is number 8 in white, and you just saw the ball bounce off his foot. He did well to avoid the collision with the defender, but then the ball bounced off, looks like his left foot. You have to jump out of the way or stop and let the ball pass you by. You cannot be hit by the ball. That runner is out. Here, it's pretty straightforward. The batter misses the ball in the attempt of hitting. Swing and a miss in baseball is a strike. Swing and a miss in baseball 5 is an out. And we won't watch that too many more times. In this next example, the batter is out because his hit ball goes directly into the fence. If the ball had bounced or the defense had touched it before it hit the fence, it would have been in play. But because it went straight into the fence, it's an out. And there it is. Very smart play by the defender in blue. She could have tried to catch it, but it wasn't going to be an easy catch. So instead, she read the situation, saw that it was going to hit the fence, let it go by and hit the fence. The batter's out. This is a similar situation, but this time the batter hits the ball over the fence. Obviously, that's great news if you're playing baseball or softball, but in baseball 5, it's an automatic out, and there was no delay by the field official making that call of out. You do not want to hit a home run by hitting it over the fence. Can't happen. Yet another way an offensive player, and in this case a base runner, can eliminate themselves is by leaving the base before the ball is hit. So the runner on first base actually left the base before the batter had hit the ball. It's a matter of a second, a split second even. But you saw the feet going with the runner at first on the right-hand side of your screen before the ball's hit. That base runner is out for leaving early. Another example of illegal behavior resulting in an out is when the first bounce of the ball is in foul territory. It's an easy one for the officials to spot, and the batter is always out. And there you can see, clearly it bounces on the foul side of that first base line. I think we'll watch it one more time. And we'll follow that last point up by noting a key difference between baseball 5 and baseball and softball. In baseball 5, it really is only the first bounce that matters. You'll see in this video how the ball leaves fair territory after the first bounce. But the first bounce is in fair territory. In baseball and softball, the ball has to remain inside the foul lines at least until it reaches first or third base. But in baseball 5, it's just the first bounce that matters. And you can see it bounces on the black and the white, fair territory, before it winds up in foul territory. So while that would be a foul ball in baseball and softball, that is a valid hit in baseball 5. And it's actually a really smart play and a good hit. There are other ways still that offensive players can be ruled out. We don't have video examples of these. They're far less common, but I don't think you'll have any trouble understanding that an offensive player can be ruled out by intentionally faking to hit the ball, by passing a teammate while base running. If two or more players wind up on the same base, then the player behind in the batting order shall be ruled out. The lead runner would be safe. So for example, there could be a wild play where two players of the same offensive team both wind up on second base. Well, the lead runner would be allowed to stay. Whoever was running behind the lead runner, they would be called out. And another note is that runners must do everything possible to avoid colliding with defenders. Should a field official decide that a runner could have avoided a collision, the runner that initiated the collision will be ruled out. Still more ways that outs can be recorded. One is if a team fails to respect the batting order, if they hit out of turn. If a team hits out of turn, though, it's not an automatic out. It's the responsibility of the defensive team to notify the game officials before the next batter enters the batter's box. If the defensive team doesn't report it, no action will be taken by the game officials. If the defense does report a batting order infraction, whatever the result of the play was will not count. The legitimate batter, the one who is supposed to be at bat, will be ruled out, and the game will continue with the next player in the batting order taking their regular turn. So this is an incentive for defensive players and coaches as well to pay careful attention to the other team when they're batting, because if they bat out of turn, they could get away with it if the defensive team doesn't point it out to the officials. That concludes our look at outs and ways to record outs. And now we'll look at some dead ball scenarios. We'll start with a very simple one. If the ball leaves the field of play after a valid hit and is no longer playable by the defense, the ball is declared dead and the game stops. There are a few ways this can happen, so we'll go through them now. We're going to start with a familiar example. In this case, no defender touches the ball before it leaves the field, and the result is that each runner simply advances to the next base. This is our same hit that we showed you a moment ago. It's a fair ball because the first bounce is in fair territory, but then it goes out of play and it becomes a dead ball. In this case, the batter gets to go to first base, and every other runner who's already on advances to their next base. No extra bases are awarded here. As we mentioned just a few moments ago, it's a really well-executed hit, and it can be, at times, a very smart offensive play. In our next example, the ball leaves the field after having touched a defender in the attempt of fielding. Again, in this case, the batter gets to go to first, and every other runner advances to the next base. No extra bases are awarded. So watch this. It's hit towards second base. It bounces off the second baseman and over the fence out of play. So the batter will wind up at first base. Every other runner will advance to their next base. And that's all. No extra bases awarded. This is not an error if it bounces off a defender out of play. We'll look at errors in just a moment. Ball can also be called dead if an official calls obstruction. An obstruction is when an official deems that the batter runner, or any runner, is obstructed while running to their next base. In this case, the ball is dead, and all runners advance to the bases they would have reached had there not been obstruction. So it's not as if extra bases are awarded, but let's just say you're running from first to second, and the second baseman gets in your way. If the officials see it and make the proper call, you'll get to go to second base. So it's important for the defenders not to block the base paths, or they'll be giving away a lot of free bases. Now we will look at defensive errors. And if the ball leaves the field due to a defensive error, which is defined as a missed throw or a missed catch, each runner will be awarded an extra base. The batter goes to second base, the runner on first base goes to third, and so on and so on. So the two types of defensive errors that can be made are on a bad throw or on a missed catch. And it's not a fielding error like the example we saw before, but a missed catch being a ball thrown to you by one of your teammates. It's the discretion of the field official to call an error and award the extra base to the offense. And that's another big difference between Baseball 5 and baseball and softball. Errors are not given by scorekeepers, they're given by field officials in Baseball 5, and it will result in extra bases being awarded. So here's an example of an error on an overthrow to first base. There's an out at second, but then that next throw goes soaring up and away from the first baseman. He can't catch it, so the runner who comes hustling up the first base line, number 6 there, he'll be awarded second base. Now we want to tell you about a unique situation in Baseball 5 that cannot happen in baseball or softball. And it's worth mentioning here because it happens more often than you can imagine. In a situation with bases loaded and 2 outs, where the runner at third base is due up, according to the batting order, each runner advances 1 base. The runner on third comes in to hit, and a pinch runner is placed on first base. In teams with only 5 players, teams that don't have any reserve players, the first player called out in that inning becomes the pinch runner on first base. The batting order shall always be respected, and that's a very important principle and the foundation of Baseball 5. And that may sound confusing, that rule, but instead of just reading it to you again, we want to show you an example. Now I'm going to read this all the way through, and this is an example of an inning. It starts with Paul batting. Paul records a base hit, so he's on first base with no outs. Jane comes up to hit next. She records a base hit. That moves Paul to second base, and Jane is on first. There's still nobody out in the inning. Mike goes into the batter's box next. Mike records a base hit. Paul is on third base. Jane is on second base. Mike is now on first base, and there's still no outs. So the bases are loaded, and Steve goes into the batter's box. Steve flies out for the first out of the inning. Paul's still on third, Jane's still on second, Mike's still on first. Kim is the new batter. Kim also flies out for the second out of the inning. Paul is still on third, Jane is still on second, Mike is still on first, but now there's 2 outs. Paul is the next scheduled batter, but he's still on third base. And this team does not have any reserve players. This team is just made up of these 5 individuals who we've already named. So in this case, Paul leaves third base, goes into the batter's box, Jane advances from second to third, Mike goes from first to second, and Steve becomes the runner at first base as a pinch runner. And it's Steve that goes there because he was the first out of the inning. Now, I know it's a little bit confusing, but really all it'll take is it happens one time and you become very familiar with it. And it's just a way that you can keep the game moving and still have just 5 players on your team. But now we're going to look at interference. Of course, if one of the game officials sees that a runner has interfered with the defensive play, the runner will be ruled out. And we'll see it in this example here. On the upper right-hand part of your screen, right by that Baseball 5 box, watch the runner off of first base get in the way of the second baseman trying to field it. That is an out. One more time. The runner is out. As for calling time, a player can request time when a play is over, but the ball is still alive until the game official grants time. Once the game official agrees that the play is over and agrees to call time, they raise up their hands. And it's very clear to everybody on the field that time has been granted. And in this first example, you'll see it granted appropriately. The player asks for it, the umpire or the field official grants it. We'll watch this a couple more times. The player, number 7, asks for time, and then on the right-hand side of the screen, the field official gives the same signal. So first, watch number 7. Time, look to the right, time. That's a dead ball at that point, and the defense can reset as the next batter gets ready to hit. Good job by the official there. In the second example, however, the play was still moving, but the game officials granted time anyway. Now, as this play unfolds, you'll see that runner in red is between second and third base, standing right in between second and third when the field official raised his arms to signal time. So we'll watch it a few more times. Look at second base. There's the runner on his way to third. And now look to the right. Time is granted, and the defensive team is upset because they felt that they could have made a play and maybe recorded an out. And truth be told, I would agree with them. So watch here. The runner is kind of lost, but the official calls time, and so the play is dead. And that, in this instance, worked to the disadvantage of the defensive team. The play should have continued. We'll let this finish up one more time. There's the inappropriate time call. And the team is upset. And rightly so. Moving on to our section on unsportsmanlike behavior. We'll let everybody know up front that if there is unsportsmanlike behavior from any delegation member, including players, coaches, and team managers, on or off the field, and one of the game officials sees or hears it, the responsible person may be ejected from the game. During tournaments, there will also be an additional suspension of at least one match that is applied automatically. So if you're ejected from a game, not only are you gone from that game, but you'll be gone from the next one too, and even from an entire match. So the bottom line is be respectful. And if you're caught being disrespectful, well, be prepared to deal with the consequences. When it comes to substitutions, teams are allowed to make tactical or injury substitutions. Tactical substitutions can be made only when the team switches from offense to defense. The reserve players that enter the game can enter only once. If they're substituted and replaced, they cannot re-enter, but a starting player can re-enter the game to regain his or her original spot in the batting order. So a starting player can be replaced, but then come back in and reclaim their original spot in the order. But the reserve player who acts as the substitute, once they're taken out, can never come back into the game. Injury substitutions, on the other hand, can take place whenever a player suffers an injury. Therefore, can be made at any time in a game, assuming an injury occurs. The injured player, once removed, cannot re-enter the game under any circumstances. And if the injury occurs during a best-of-3 game series, the injured player is out for the whole series. So it could be game 1 of a best-of-3 match, and if you leave due to injury, you cannot be involved in any of the 3 games in that match. And as we get near the end of this presentation, we come to an important question. When is the game over? Well, A game's over if, at the end of the 5th inning, one team has scored more runs than the other. Simple as that. A 5-inning game, one team scores more than the opponent. The team with more runs in that case is the winner. If the home team is ahead after the visitor team has completed its 5th offensive inning, the game is also over, and in that case, the home team wins. So sometimes games can only be 4.5 innings if the home team is ahead at the conclusion of the top of the 5th. In matches played over a series of 3 games, the team that wins 2 is the winner of the match. And that will set up some very exciting matches, no doubt about it. There's also the run-ahead rule, which states that a game is also over if a team leads by 15 runs at the end of the 3rd inning or by 10 runs at the end of the 4th inning. A note here is that if the visitor team builds a lead of 10 or more runs during the top half of the 5th inning, the game shall be completed with the home team still batting in the bottom of the 5th. So if the visitor team is ahead by 9 after 4 innings, no matter what happens in the top of the 5th, there will be a bottom half of the 5th inning. The run-ahead rule is there to just keep games from getting completely out of hand. The tiebreak rule states that if a game is tied after 5 innings, the teams will play and complete extra innings until one team has scored more runs than their opponent at the end of the extra inning. In the first extra inning, both teams will start with a runner on first base. In the second extra inning, both teams will begin with runners on first and second. Runners will start on all bases. It'll be a bases loaded situation from the 3rd extra inning onwards. And runners must be placed on base without modifying the batting order. So that'll be easy to keep track of as you get deep into a game. I know we just gave you a lot of rules, but we've made it to the end of the entire Baseball 5 rulebook. We certainly thank you for your attention, and we look forward to bringing you more information about Baseball 5 in the next module.